This happened in the very early 90s, and as we all know, it was a very different world those days, and for a kid, I was pretty naive. I also had kind of a messed up childhood, so this wasn't the worst things to happen by far, and therefore, I pretty much just brushed it off. When I was around 11 or 12 years old, I would visit the boys' club a lot. My parents thought that sending me to the boys' club camp for the summer only made sense. The camp wasn't an overnight type deal, but featured all of the normal things that you would expect, like a lake, arts, crafts area, and crappy school-style lunches. I did the normal camp things like found a girlfriend and getting into a lot of trouble. The camp was run by counselors, which I can only assume were in their 20s to 30s. And as you would expect, they would always come up with very interesting punishments for kids, like being forced to carry a huge wooden totem pole in circles in a hot field for quite some time, or just straight up punching you in your chest and knocking the wind out of you, which I did experience. One of the counselors that I had this experience with was named TJ. He was a very large, well-built guy in his 20s. One day I did something wrong and then I got sent to the lunch area for essentially detention. The area was large and was actually a large concrete floor with a wooden roof attached to a cabin that contained the kitchen. It was basically a school lunch setup where you would come and choose chocolate milk or orange juice and then get served a really crappy turkey sandwich, a pack of mayo, and one of those amazing brownies. When I get there, I noticed that there's about 4 or 5 kids already sitting at benches, and I noticed that TJ's in the front of everyone by the lunch serving area, pacing and saying something. I then sit down and I don't really remember what happened. That is, until things started to get weird. TJ pulled out a knife and got an apple. He started skinning and stabbing it and saying stuff like,
"This is what I'll do to you if you all get in trouble again,"
and other things of that nature. At this time, I honestly didn't feel scared in any way due to my tendency to completely shut down when crap gets bad, but I do remember feeling very creeped out and that he was trying way too hard to be threatening. All of the younger kids, especially a little girl who was maybe about 8 years old or so, was freaking out and crying. The next thing I remember is him telling her to follow him into the kitchen, and then I heard a lot of screaming and crying coming from the back of the kitchen. After a while, he came back with her, and her face was totally streamed with tears. I remember it vividly. He then looked at me and another boy and told us to follow him as he escorted us to a huge walk-in refrigerator and then brought us inside. He then said,
"I want you both to start screaming and acting like I'm hurting you in here. If you don't make the other kids scared, I will hurt you for real."
We did as he asked, and when he closed the door, we both just started screaming and wailing. At this point, I honestly thought it was kind of funny because I rationalized that the little girl was probably just told the same thing. Anyway, after about 5 or 10 minutes, he let us out and told us to go back to our benches. Again, I don't really remember anything after this, just kind of a blank. I remember when I got home that night from camp telling my mom about it, and I remember she called someone, and I think the guy got fired. I don't really remember ever seeing him again, and my parents never sent me back to that camp. I never really thought about it much growing up, but as the years have gone by, I look back to things that I shrugged off as normal, and I can now see that they were anything but that. Try not to be as gullible as I was. This weird older guy catcalled me while I was shopping in town, and when I didn't respond, he started walking. He then started following me for an uncomfortably long time, so I made my way to my brother's friend's workplace and then explained what happened. He was gone by the time we went back outside to check, but he called my brother to pick me up anyway. I didn't really think much of it after that. Fast forward a couple of months and I get a call from someone claiming to be my sister's friend from university. He had claimed that she had given him a parcel for me and that he needed to meet with me right away at a secluded location because it was close to my house. This is something my sister had done 3 or 4 times previously. He knew my name, my sister's name, her friends, her university, my friends, and my high school. After the chat, I agreed to meet him at our local shops where I was well known. It wasn't that far from where he had suggested, so he agreed. I made my way there, and then I froze when I saw him walking towards me. It was him, the same guy that had followed me around months earlier. He then said something along the lines of,
"Finding you was a piece of cake."
And I didn't wait to find out what he meant. I went straight into the butcher's and quickly told him what was going on. He was chased away by a knife-wielding butcher, and I never heard from him or saw him ever again. When my sister finally picked up the phone, she said that she had no such friend and didn't even know what I was talking about. It really took a lot of convincing to let my dad let me go anywhere after that happened. I try my best not to think about what his intentions were, but to this day, every time I think about it, it still gives me the creeps. My father worked in a machine shop across town which had its fair share of characters there. One of these people was named James. Now, James was one of those guys that would seem normal at first but had one heck of a temper. One minute you could be eating lunch, and then the next he would be trying to fight you over the smallest things. So while my father was at work, James had come in absolutely drunk, which many of the guys had done before, but James could barely function, let alone operate a mill. My father pulled him aside and told him he needed to leave, and that him coming in drunk could possibly get him or someone else hurt, which then leads to him getting mad and trying to fight my father. Now, James isn't a small guy. He's about 6 foot tall and around the larger side, while my father was only about 5'6". James had grabbed a metal pole and was swinging it around trying to hit my father with it. Thankfully he didn't hit him, but he tore the heck out of a door before being restrained by the other workers and was then kicked out, being fired. My father ended up leaving work early, and he made his way to a friend's place to have a beer and calm his nerves. Later on in the day, 8-year-old me is home alone as my mother was at the store getting groceries. I was playing Halo 3 at the time before hearing a knock at the door. I walked up to the door and I see James through the window. Although I didn't know him well as I've only met him once, I knew him well enough to know that he wasn't a stranger, so I opened the door.
"Hey, how are you? Is your father home?"
He had said in the nicest tone that he could muster, his breath smelling of alcohol. I had told him no, but somehow my 8-year-old self knew well enough to not say that I was home alone. My mom was in the shower. That was an absolute lie, and her truck wasn't even in the driveway, and it was pretty obvious I was home alone. He had then nodded, walking away from the door a little before I closed it, promptly locking it before going back to my game. A few minutes pass by and my mother arrives home with a few groceries. Once they were brought inside, we had heard a bang at the door, then another, then another. This was not like a knock. Someone was literally banging on our door trying to get in. My mom had looked through the window before grabbing me and the phone and running into the bedroom closet which had a lock. I had no clue what was going on, but I just knew it wasn't good. She had called 911 and had said there was a crazy man trying to break in. All the while the sound of the banging could be heard in the background. For what seemed like hours, we waited in the closet still hearing the loud bangs as he had started charging into the door with his shoulder, just screaming like a maniac. After about 15 minutes, we then heard the familiar sound of a police siren as we heard the confrontation right outside. It didn't take long for them to arrest the man. My mom stayed on the line with the 911 operator until we finally walked out, now seeing James in cuffs in the very back of a patrol car. My father had rushed home and hugged us both, James staring at us with pure hatred in his eyes. Although it wasn't confirmed, I had a good feeling that he was after my dad, wanting to finish the job and beating him. He had seen my mother's truck thinking it was my father, as he would occasionally drive it to work every now and then. To the awful man who tried to break into our home, and to the man who tried to hurt my father, I really hope I never see you ever again. So it's the summer of 2013. I'm 21 years old and just finished my junior year in college. The second week of August, a group of my friends and I go on an 8-day camping trip. It's about 7 of us in total, 4 guys and 3 girls. We're camping in a semi-remote campground in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. It was a large campground, but very few other campers were there. There were a few field sites near the front of the campground, but we purposely requested a site off in the back corner. We wanted to be completely by ourselves. During the trip, we planned a whitewater rafting trip for one of the days. We were hiking Mount Washington towards the end of the trip and thought maybe we'd do 1 to 2 other small hikes, with 1 to 2 days of just chilling by the lake at the campground. We also planned on doing plenty of drinking during the evenings. The first couple of days of the trip were fantastic. Whitewater rafting was a blast. Everything went great. So it's the evening of our 3rd day, and we're having a roaring fire going. We're all just hanging out at the campsite, just drinking and messing around. It's now around 9:30 when a disheveled-looking man walks past our site. His clothes are kind of torn and worn out, and he had messy and tangled hair. He looks maybe in his mid-40s if I had to guess. This isn't weird though. We all just think that it's just another camper doing a late evening stroll around the campground. About an hour and a half later, we see this same man walk past our site in the same direction. This time, however, he's walking a little slower, almost with a bit of a limp. We're all pretty drunk at this point, and I'm not really sure, but I think one of us yelled something out to him. But he just ignores us and keeps on walking. Mildly strange, but still, probably just someone who wanted to take a really long walk. We wrap up the night at around 1:30 to 2 a.m. The fire is dying down and we head back to our tents. I usually really love sleeping while camping. I usually find it extremely peaceful, but for some reason, I was having some trouble getting some sleep this night. I get up and decide to take a pee in the woods. When I do, I then see a faint light maybe about 50 to 75 yards ahead of me in the woods. It kind of looks like a dim flashlight or something similar. I decide I want to investigate. I go back to the tents and one of my other buddies is still awake, so I decide to tell him about it. We get up to investigate, and when we do, the light is no longer on. Feeling a little creeped out, I shine my flashlight around the woods a bit, but I don't see anything, so I decide that maybe my eyes were just playing a trick on me, and I decide to head back to bed. Sometime later that night, I wake up to a terrifying scream. It was my friend Sarah, one of the girls that we were camping with. I jump out of my tent as quickly as possible and nearly run into her as she's running back to our campsite. She's still screaming. She screams that there was a man standing in the middle of the woods. Now our entire group of people is now awake and everyone is freaking the heck out. I try to calm Sarah down enough to get her to explain what actually happened. She says that she went to pee in the woods and then saw the man from earlier just standing about 15 feet from her. Not moving, just standing there like a statue. We're all freaking out now, just yelling and screaming and just making a giant commotion. I'm internally freaking out as well, but try to calm everyone down enough so we can actually do something. We obviously decide to get the heck out of there. We frantically take down our tents, basically just ripping the poles out and throwing everything back into our cars. We then get into the car and speed the heck out of there. It's now around 4 a.m. and we're in 2 separate cars, and we decide to just drive away from the campsite just to try and clear our heads. Eventually, at around 5:30, we find a small diner that's open and we decide to head in for some breakfast. We all have different theories about what the heck just happened. Some of us think we just ran into a homeless guy who was camping out in the woods and was surprised by us. Some of the girls think maybe he was stalking us. Either way, obviously none of us are comfortable staying at that campground again. I head back to the front desk of the campground with 2 of the other guys. We explained what happened, and the guys at the front desk actually seemed to believe us, but they said there was definitely no other campers that fit the description of the guy. They were insanely nice about it though, and they actually refunded most of the remainder of our stay, which really astonished me. As a group, we decided that screw it, we weren't going to let one freaky guy ruin our trip. We find another campground a good ways away to stay at. Fast forward 2 days and we're hiking Mount Washington. We get up really early and get to the mountain at around 7:30 to start hiking up. We're a little over halfway up the mountain when we then see the very same guy hiking down. We're all just frozen, and a few of us let out a surprise scream. He just strolls right past us with this massive creepy grin plastered all over his face. Luckily, there are enough hikers nearby that nothing could really happen. We decide to continue hiking up anyways, since he's headed in the opposite direction and we're probably never going to encounter him again. We did finish the hike and luckily we didn't see him again. After that, we did decide to cut the trip a couple of days short. Looking back on it, we've all come to the conclusion that we were very likely being stalked in some way or another. If it really was just some homeless guy in the woods near the campground, what the heck is he doing hiking down Mount Washington a couple days later? It was definitely a creepy experience. My mom's identical twin could not be more opposite of her in every aspect, except for their identical appearance. My aunt is a free-spirited traveling woman who is now unmarried in her 60s who moves whenever she gets bored of her town. She was no different when she was young. She found herself hitchhiking when she was traveling in the United States. We're from Canada. She said that one night when she was trying to hitch a ride, a nice man then pulled over and offered her a ride. She said a nice man dressed very well got out of his car on the side of the road and then asked her if she would like a ride with him. Her immediate reaction was how handsome he was, and that she actually fantasized about her and this man traveling the country together and him joining her lifestyle. He specifically asked her questions about her in an effort to make sure she wasn't some crazy person. She said that she appreciated this, and his apprehension made him trustworthy. She got in the car and they rode for about 5 minutes before he then leaned over and locked her door, telling her it's jiggly and can fall open if unlocked. This made her immediately uncomfortable, and she said that she decided that she wanted to get out. There was a couple other things that he said that she felt were off-putting, but I can't remember exactly what they were, and I don't want to spread false info. She said that she hopped out at the next red light, and he even tried to grab her as she ran out. A few years later, when Ted Bundy was finally caught, her, my mom, and my mom's then boyfriend were watching the broadcast on TV. My mom says that my aunt screamed when his face popped up on the TV, because she recognized him as the man who picked her up years before. To this day, she swears up and down that she's 100% positive it was him. It's absolutely crazy to think what could have happened if she didn't follow her gut instinct. Okay, so I'm a 29-year-old female. I switched up my career in healthcare to follow my dream of learning to work on cars. I was hired this past May at a dealership as a quick service mechanic and fell in love immediately with everything about it and my coworkers. I had kind of noticed just how cute my trainer was. Not only was he cute, but he was very patient with training me. I was so new to working on cars and I needed to learn the basics, and he was just so cute and nice about everything. I'll call him Nick. Nick was about 40. Me and Nick had really hit it off in every way possible. He asked me on our first date to go geocaching. Well, Nick and I have been side by side ever since. I really loved everyone I worked with, always laughing and playing pranks on one another, but also always helping each other and busting our butts to always make the customers happy. I should add that my best friend also works there as well, and another good friend of ours had also gotten hired. We were a close-knit family in the quick service department. Well, I didn't make it past my probationary period because I was just a bit slower. So Nick has a full mechanic garage at his dad's place, and I'd meet him after work and we'd go make some side money. So about a month ago, Nick and I decided to get an apartment together, and it's been amazing. I've been bringing him to work, grabbing him on lunch break, and picking him up, which I absolutely love because I can also say hey to all of my old coworkers. That being said, I should also add that Nick doesn't have any social media, and we're together literally all the time, except when he's working. Here's where things get crazy. I get a message request on Facebook from some random girl saying, "I can't believe what I'm seeing. Nick is my man and he's in your profile photo with you. He's been my man for 7 months. Now I immediately go into panic mode. I call him at work asking who this girl is, and he was just as confused as I was. The more I talked to this girl to try and figure out what the heck's going on, the more she said weirdly specific things about Nick. Like the truck he drives, they meet up at his dad's shop, and she knew his phone number and everything. But she could never provide proof or a screenshot of conversations or any photos of them two together. Nothing. We got to a point where it felt like this whole thing was real and that her and I were going to team up, but she never answered any of my calls, only messages. After Nick and I had a huge talk about it, I just knew that something wasn't right about this girl, and I had to get to the bottom of it. I started getting pretty freaking scared when one day I dropped Nick off after lunch. A minute went by and I get a weird message saying, "Dang, Nick looks really sexy in that hoodie today." Now, this totally shook me up. I asked what color, and she said the correct color. At this point, my first thought is this stalker's like actually watching us. I then told Nick about how she knew what he was wearing, and he was super creeped out. Then when I went to pick him up, I usually park by the quiet side of the building where no one can actually see me. This time though, a work truck drives by me very slowly. I pretend to not notice him because I was in no mood to chat with anyone, and I recognized the driver as a former coworker of mine that I'd only spoke to maybe about 2 times during my time at the dealership. However, we happened to be friends on Facebook. Within about a minute of him passing me by, the girlfriend then messages me saying, "You're waiting for Nick on the side of the building right now. I see you." In that moment, I just started freaking out. This dude is pretending to be my boyfriend's girlfriend. Then after talking to Nick about it, it turns out he was the only one from work that knew about Nick's dad having a shop. Nick had actually worked on this guy's truck before. They aren't really friends, but just kinda chat here and there. Well, not anymore. But I just don't know why he was saying such gross things to me, and why he was pretending to be my boyfriend's girlfriend. If he's capable of doing this, who the heck knows what else he's capable of? He's also a giant dude in his 40s with children of his own. I see this dude every day, and Nick still works with him. He's in a different department than Nick, so thank God for that. So yeah, I'm still not sure what to do about this. But crazy former coworker pretending to be my boyfriend's girlfriend to get us to break up or something. I really wish I didn't have to meet you again, even though I know I'll be seeing you at work tomorrow. You really need to stay away from Nick and I. There was this one time where this guy that I matched with on Tinder drove like 2 hours to come see me at my job. I had no idea that he was even showing up. I had walked back from the storage room and there he was, just there. He pulled up my profile and then said,
"It's me. Very nice to finally meet you."
Now, I have no problem meeting new people that I've talked to before, but yeah, this was a game changer. I warmed up into talking to him and we sat down at the booth. I made it pretty obvious that I didn't want him sitting right beside me, but he scooted me over and then started touching me. At this point, I was just over it. Closing time had came around and he wanted me to walk him to his Jeep. As I was walking away, he then grabbed my hand and started kissing me. Not like the enjoyable magical kiss, but like I need this to be over kind of kiss. He started biting my tongue and then squeezing my sides. I've never felt so violated in my life. From that point on, I never told anybody that I met online where I work unless I knew it was going somewhere. To this day, I still can't believe that creep showed up to my work. I definitely hope nothing like that happens again. This happened a few years ago. I was living alone in a large city where I didn't really know that many people. At the time, I was seeing someone and had just dropped him off at the metro station. It was around 2 in the afternoon, so still lots of people around and very sunny. I had no real reason to feel weary. I went into the metro line that I had to take to get home and just sat on the bench. There was one other guy sitting there, and when I sat down, he just started looking at me. I assumed he just looked out of curiosity, but we made eye contact. I smiled and said hi, and instantly, I just knew it was a mistake. He smiled back and then said hi, and for a moment, I thought I was just overreacting. We both sat down into the metro car, and then he sat down across from me. I thought it was no big deal, and eventually it seemed like he ran into someone he knew, as they were chatting for a bit. Eventually his friend got up and left, and that's when it started. Every time I looked up at him, he was just staring at me, smiling. He said hi to me after about the 3rd or 4th time that this happened. My heart sank. Eventually I saw my stop coming up. I would have to change lines here, so I was really hoping I could get away from him. I then got up and waited near the door. He also got up and waited behind me. I was wearing a skirt, and in the reflection of the metro car window, I could see him very slowly rake his eyes up my legs. As soon as the door opened, I walked quickly right out of it. He followed. I decided to see if he was really following me, so I started walking towards one end of the platform where there was an exit. He walked the same way. There were some people in between us, so I didn't really think he would try anything. I suddenly swerved and walked towards another exit. He followed me yet again. I did this 2 or 3 more times, and he was going the same way every single time. I started to panic now, and I really wasn't sure what to do. In a big city like that, people are just looking to go on their way as quickly as possible, so I didn't really feel confident in stopping someone and asking for help. I didn't think I could lose him so easily by walking around. I saw that the hallway to the line that I needed to take was pretty crowded, and I decided to take my chances and try to lose him there. He was quickly in pursuit. Now, I'm pretty small, so I was able to weave through the crowd faster than he was, but he quickly caught up to me anyways. At one point, he had actually cornered me in the hallway.
"Hi, how are you?"
he asked, with a friendly smile still on his face. It terrified me. Here he was stalking me in broad daylight, and he was so serene about it. It was extremely unsettling. I looked around. There were so many people, but they were all in a hurry to reach the metro. I saw to my right that there was a staircase to a metro platform. That's when I decided to try and make a break for it. With no warning, I sprinted off. He seemed caught off guard because he didn't really follow me right away. I was so lucky that he didn't. By the time he started chasing me, there were way too many people for him to pass to catch up. I was in a total panic though, and still ran like my life depended on it. I practically flew down the stairs and into a metro car that had just pulled in. When the doors closed behind me, I just saw him standing at the top of the stairs, just looking at me. Some people in the metro car seemed unsettled by just how scared I looked and kept glancing at me, but no one said anything. I kind of just stood there shaking for a couple of stops. Eventually, I looked to see where I was, and it turned out that I'd caught the line home after all. It didn't really make me feel any safer though. So, to that really weird metro guy who was straight up stalking me in broad daylight, I can only hope that I don't encounter you ever again at the metro. Hey everyone. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you have your own personal scary story or experience, be sure to submit them to my website at southerncannibal.com. Stay safe, everyone, and remember to always stay hungry.